How would you handle these worst HOA neighbors ever? This post is by Sensitive Ad 1896. I lived in the same HOA off and on in my 20s and early 30s. There were 3 or 4 streets and probably no more than about 60 houses in the development. It was a 0 lot line community and, of course, the very worst of the worst HOA jerks lived right next door. I received handwritten complaints inside my mailbox, illegal by the way, on multiple occasions. The ones I remember were about trash cans left out for too long. I was in major depressive states on those occasions, and essentially ordered to keep my dog quiet inside my own house when I wasn't even there. They would invite themselves over to my front yard to ambush me while outside with, "Your garage door doesn't need to be up right now," or "Your front shrubs need to be trimmed. This oleander should never have been planted here." On so many of these occasions, I wanted to tell this jerk where he could stick it, but he was a good 30 years older and so ridiculously entitled. I didn't have the guts, and it probably wasn't worth it. At some point, my close family member directly across the street started yelling at them as soon as they stepped foot off the road and onto the front of her property. When I left for a few years, the house sat empty while the homeowner, my family member, was in a nursing home, and then moved back. Things had escalated. Before I had left, these jerks had routinely parked a minivan in their driveway. Then their live-in, 30-something-year-old adult son got a new car and wanted it more protected, so he made some kind of deal with a woman down the street to use her garage since she didn't need the second parking spot. Fine, cool, I don't care. What I did care about was when they started complaining about cars in my driveway. This wasn't something that I did regularly, but my very close friends ended up in a legitimately unsafe situation where they lived and they came to stay with me while they figured out how to get out of their lease and move. The HOA jerk next door neighbors lost it. They tried to throw the bylaw book at me for having cars stored in the driveway. The cars were being used daily and lots of other people parked in their own driveways consistently. At this point, I went through the bylaws with a fine-tooth comb. As it turned out, there was a rule explicitly barring one homeowner from using the garage of another homeowner. Why? I don't know or care. Of course, that was a rule that didn't need to be followed, but our driveway had to be clear, shrubs trimmed to their liking, and trash cans brought in before the garbage truck was off the street. There were a couple short cul-de-sacs in the neighborhood that ran right up to a ravine, so there was no house at the end of these streets. Apparently, these jerks didn't like that a homeowner parked his work-supplied and branded truck on the street at the end of his cul-de-sac. Their first call to complain wasn't to him, wasn't to the HOA, it was to his employer that supplied the truck. These people were ruthless and garbage humans. These are the same neighbors that complained that I didn't pick up my dog's poo in my own front yard. We didn't have any backyards at all, and almost no one had grass in their small side courtyards. They were upset that my 10-pound dog who runs straight out to pee and straight back wasn't on a leash because their dog was aggressive and pulling out at the same time. Because clearly, my dog being on a leash would totally fix that. Once we got a third car and parked it routinely in the driveway, they all completely lost their minds, knocking at all hours to complain while I worked enterprise sales at home, literally peeking over their courtyard wall into my kitchen, making nasty comments to my boss about me, who they went to church with, and calling my parents and other family to complain about me. These same people caused other residents to walk a certain route to avoid going past the jerk's house. It was a quiet neighborhood, so anytime someone had a party, there was a noise complaint and lots of spying on what exactly was occurring, followed by more complaints more often than not. They convinced the HOA that we shouldn't be allowed to attend HOA meetings or use the pool because our names weren't on the deed. This even though we paid all the bills, the taxes, and the HOA fees directly. Eventually, they let me in the meetings, but tried to tell me that I couldn't speak. That didn't last long. And then they tried to not allow me to vote until my father showed up to a meeting to remind them that he owned 2 properties in the neighborhood by proxy and power of attorney. My final straws were when they had their roof replaced and their roofers entered my courtyard unannounced, seeing me partially clothed in my own kitchen and then trampling my landscaping every day for a week. After that one, I was throwing roofing nails back over their wall and onto their driveway for months. They officially complained to the HOA about a small tree that wasn't trimmed to their liking, so I brought up their son's car in the neighbor's garage, and the woman who owned the said garage ended up throwing a tantrum completely with fake tears in my living room because apparently he was paying her and she needed that income. However, it was particularly satisfying when my partner told the next door neighbor that he didn't like the highly pruned style of their front yard and preferred our slightly more wild look. I swear, that man turned as bright red as a fire truck. Almost as red as when we pointed out that the neighborhood really wasn't that nice due to the enormous metal electric towers running down the middle of our street. There were islands in the road to accommodate these huge things that you could hear buzzing even from inside 24/7. About 6 months before we bought our house and got the heck out of there, I was walking my dog on a leash and she peed in another neighbor's yard on the way by. We turned to continue and I heard a voice say, "Clean up after the dog." Well, I turned around and there was no one there. This woman was yelling at me through her doorbell about non-existent dog poop. I am not proud to say that I saw red and proceeded to read her the riot act into her doorbell and pressing it repeatedly, telling her to come out. She never said another thing, never came out, and I never did see the woman ever. I never did bring up that my awful neighbors had at least 2 businesses running out of their house, strictly forbade in the bylaws, literally broke into the irrigation system controls to water their yard more on the HOA's dime, or that they had a visible water spigot and hose in their front yard. It just wasn't worth it. Perhaps this was more of a post about bad neighbors, but I will never, ever, as long as I live, own or live in an HOA again. My family is fully out of there now, and no one has anything nice to say about the place. Do you agree with these commenters? On In order to keep the dog quiet inside the own house, commenter says, "I didn't need to read past this. How dare someone expect peace in their own home?" OP says, you come to my door and tell me that a 10-pound dog behind the brick walls of my house is disturbing you from inside your bricked house, and I'm gonna laugh while I slam the door in your face." Comment says, "Can we not compare everyone we don't like to that group? That's super messed up and insensitive. Frankly, you both sound insufferable." What'd you think of this story? Neighbor that's on the HOA board is falsely accusing my family of running a business from home. Recently, my mom and me went to our HOA meeting to discuss the possibility of them allowing us to get a shed, as sheds are currently not allowed in our neighborhood, but there's been talks about changing that rule. Anyways, during the meeting, the former HOA president's husband suddenly, and out of nowhere, asked my mother during the meeting if she was still running a business from home. So my mom asked what he was talking about, as my mother has never run a business from home, to which he replied, "Well, early in the morning for years, you guys had a lot of boxes delivered to your home." This was really upsetting, as the multiple boxes we often got delivered to our house were my dad's medical supplies for his dialysis. This was explained to him, but he insisted that we were running a business from home, which is against HOA rules. It was crazy. He falsely lamented that we had boxes delivered to our home for about 20 years, which is false, and that my dad was not sick for that long. Mind you, we don't really know this man, nor does he know us, besides the fact that he's our neighbor, and nor did he know my dad. Very audacious. Anyways, this made my mother break down in tears, as he and the neighbors know that my dad passed away from his health issues just last year. This man doesn't know us. When we explained this, he still insisted and said that, "May God strike me down if I'm lying, but you all were running a business." We are hurt that someone can say something like this, considering it was my dad's medical supplies, and what also hurt us is that the other neighbors were at the HOA meeting, they said nothing. It truly caught us off guard, as we literally had no prior problems with this man. He also made other speculations in regards as to why we want a shed, stating that he's worried that we allow someone to live in the shed. And when my mom stated that we want a shed to have more storage space, as she previously said in the previous HOA meeting, he's accusing my mom of lying, saying that she said that she wanted a shed for putting away clothes. We don't even care anymore about getting approved for a shed. Mind you, we've only ever gone to these HOA meetings to try to get approved, so we had no idea this guy was an assumptive jerk. Don't think we're going to go to another meeting again, but a part of me wants to continue to go just to make my presence known. You know what happens when you assume, right? This guy should have not just thought he knew everything and checked on it, and then he tried to defend himself when he was just busted out for lying. How would have you handled this jerk? Overly restrictive HOA rules, posted by Bart84. I just bought a car from a woman who lived in a neighborhood where the HOA does not allow auto repairs. I wanted to install brackets on the front bumper of the car so I can tow it with my truck using a flat tow bar without having to use a dolly or a trailer. But I had difficulty that day cutting the metal bumper, so I told her that I needed to get the dolly after all, but the rental place wasn't open until 7 a.m. the next day. She flipped out and threatened to call someone to tow it if I didn't get rid of the car by 8 a.m. I ultimately removed the car using a dolly that next morning, which in hindsight was a much more convenient option anyway. But what shocked me and opened my eyes is how restrictive this neighborhood is. It seems to be an upper-class suburb, and residents are very aware of everything that goes on and will complain at the smallest hint of something that they don't like. What I was doing wasn't a repair, but an addition of a feature to a car. I guess that nuance can easily be missed. But I found out that the HOA already threatened to fine her that morning, probably because one or more of the neighbors complained. Either that, or she made it up to pressure me to remove the car ASAP because she didn't trust that I would keep my word. Regardless, I realized that I would never want to live in a neighborhood where neighbors are watching your every move and ready to report a complaint to the HOA at the first hint of something that they don't like. I can see the value in these rules because it ensures a good-looking and crime-free neighborhood. But oh my goodness, I would never feel comfortable living in such a place. I live in a downtown area where none of this is a concern. I can fix my car in the street as people do all the time and not get any negative feedback. I plan to move to a house with more land and a garage for me to do auto work as I please anyway, but I never knew these restrictive neighborhoods existed. It taught me a lesson to choose wisely the next area I move into. Do you agree with this commenter or are they wrong? Some HOAs are crazy, many are not. Yes, you should be careful about what the CC&Rs are of the area in which you're viewing homes. What do you think? Home accidentally excluded from the HOA by Rural Nublet. My wife and I recently moved into a new build and we received a letter saying that our home was excluded from the HOA by mistake. The letter asked us to voluntarily join, but didn't really say anything beyond that. As it turns out, an entire section of the neighborhood was accidentally excluded from the HOA, roughly 25%. I guess the covenants weren't attached to the homes before they were sold or something like that. All of the homes, including ours, were originally intended to be in the HOA, so we were just going to sign up anyway because we were already planning to be a part of it. However, once I found out how many homes surrounding ours also weren't in the HOA, I started having doubts. We're pretty much right in the middle of the no HOA homes, so my concern is that if we sign up, we'd be subjecting ourselves to enforceable rules that many of our neighbors wouldn't be subjected to. So far, only 5 of those homes have voluntarily joined. I realize the benefits of an HOA with helping to keep your neighborhood nice and funding improvements and whatnot, but then I've also heard stories of how they recently approved someone's paint color and then tried fighting it after it was painted because they didn't agree with the shade of the color they approved. That's the kind of pettiness that I don't want to subject ourselves to if our immediate neighbor can do the same exact thing with no repercussions. What to do? Has anyone else experienced this type of thing? An update. We're going to wait it out and not willingly join. If it comes to being forced to join somehow, then yeah, so be it. But yes, it does not make sense to willingly give up some rights just for the sake of joining with no benefits to it. It doesn't provide any benefits like mowing or trash or anything else like that. We'll just be good and mindful neighbors, as we usually are, and hopefully have no problems. We're even willing to make donations to the community fund and whatnot. For the most part, it seems like the current HOA board is hands-off and may just let you be, but like many have said on here, board members change and it only takes one to muck things up. There's no telling what the future board will be like or what changes they'll propose. This commenter says, "Dear HOA, LOL, no, nice." HOA has $300,000 in reserves and isn't improving the neighborhood. Thoughts? Posted by Varen129. I'm a recent first-time homeowner in a fairly rural neighborhood as of January 2022, and I'm new to dealing with homeowners associations. Mine is behaving in a way that's left me frustrated with how they seem to be managing the yearly payments that we give them. But because I have no prior frame of reference for what's reasonable, I wanted to hear from people with more experience than I have. We pay our HOA $600 each year, and at today's meeting, they revealed they have over $300,000 in reserve accounts, comprised entirely of yearly HOA fees. They've accumulated so much that they've actually opened investment accounts for it. I recognize that an HOA will want to have some reserves on hand in case of an emergency, and I'm not opposed to HOAs in general, but the amount at issue here seems excessive. There are also a number of neighborhood improvements that seem like they should have been done before the HOA started to invest the money. To give a few examples, our neighborhood runs on well water, and if the power were to go out for a long period of time, there's no generator on the pump that would allow homes in the neighborhood to keep running water. Grass in the common areas is only mowed a few times a year, and not always completely. There's a large field in our neighborhood where the grass is routinely allowed to grow over a foot in length without being mowed for long periods of time. Ticks are a big problem here. There's a retention pond near our home that's been broken for a long time due to a mechanical failure, causing the water level to significantly drop. People who bought their homes expecting something near water have also been disappointed. Instead of hiring an engineer, HOA leadership felt that they could fix it personally as a DIY project with rocks and concrete, which, of course, did not fix the issue. Before I consider doing anything else, I just want someone to tell me whether I'm being reasonable. I generally try pretty hard to view people in a good light, but this just seems like a very lazy and conceited HOA. If they have such a large surplus and they aren't using it for anything, the least they could do is suspend our yearly payment. On the other hand, if this is basically par for the course with HOAs, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Commenter drops this answer. This is the right answer. Not for emergencies, not surplus. It is money set aside to replace existing components, not to perform routine maintenance. Do you agree? Was being coerced into maintaining common area landscaping by CEH Parrott. Less than a year into the new home, there has been a couple interactions with neighbors or the developer over a section of grass between a sidewalk and the street. At first, we were led to believe that was our grass and responsibility. Okay, so we mow and we weed eat it. One night after weed eating, I leave, and I notice someone with a blower is blowing my area that I left some trimmings on the sidewalk. Okay, I get it. That should be kept clean. I find it kinda weird that they felt the need to do that, but okay. Today, I weed eat the section by the street, and then I run to the store. Afterwards, I need to blow it off still, but I'll do it when I get back. I am pulling out of my driveway, and some guy in a truck stops in the street. He backs up, and he rolls his window down to start literally yelling about the grass and the trimmings that need to be blown. I just say, yes, I'll blow it away, and he yells, "We have an HOA." His tone was pretty negative the entire time. Not the way you'd expect a stranger to speak to another stranger. Well, he doesn't even appear to live on my street. So this interaction rubs me the wrong way. I come back, I pull up the HOA regulations filed with the county, and I proceed to scour the sections about the common area and the owner landscaping responsibilities. Come to find out, the area in question is most definitely a common area, as defined in Article 1, Section D, and is to be maintained by the association, as defined in Article 1, Section E, and Article 4, Subsection 5. So I get it, that area is a common area. It should be clean and maintained professionally, as mandated in the HOA regulations. I'll leave it for the professionals. My mistake. Maybe I should send them a bill for 125% of my labor. I mean, they would send me one if I was in violation of my landscaping and they had to maintain it. Commenter says, don't give them the idea to fine you for doing unauthorized mowing and so on in a public area. And OP replies, touche. Yeah, don't give them any extra power over you because, as we all know, HOAs never abuse their power, right? The HOA demands they put a lien on my house, but I'm not even in the HOA. If you like the first story in this video, you're going to love this one, so click a video on your screen, you don't want to miss it, and I will see you there.